Hello everyone and welcome to the Curious Geographer Live. Hope you're all well and thank you for coming. It is such a beautiful day outside, so we'll fill this with information and then let you enjoy the rest of the day and sun. We are going to be talking to Georgie Grant today. Georgie is our first professional to have a live interview with us. So she graduated from University King's College London with a geography in 2014 and has since worked as a consultant on for a design and engineering firm, and then also is now a project engineer for National Grid. So it really is kind of geography in action, which is really exciting. So we're going to hear from Georgie about what she does. We're going to talk about infrastructure. It really links to the idea in A-level geography of players, actions and futures, which if you're studying EdXL specification, looking at who is involved with different things and different projects, like who are the different stakeholders, what are their actions and how is it changing for the future, and talking about sustainability as well. And if you just see geography, it's actually on the specification itself. So when we look at development in the UK, we actually are going to be, you study smart motorways, you study ports and also HS2. So really exciting. We're really lucky to be having Georgie here. So I'm just going to pass over to Georgie. If you could just yourself and tell us a little about what your role is and what you do.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, I'm Georgie. As Ellie said, I'm a project engineer for National Grid. So I initially started my career out as an environmental consultant. So graduated geography and started a couple of months later. Worked on a whole host of different design development for large infrastructure projects throughout the UK. And then the last project I worked on was London Power Tunnel, which is a 32.5 kilometre tunnel under London, which is going to supply South London with a new cleaner electricity supply for the next 120 years. So I spent 2 years developing the environmental assessment and consents delivery on that project, and then I've actually now moved into National Grid, who are the client, and I'm a project manager or a project engineer as they call us, and I'm going to deliver the scheme, so actually build this scheme over the next 6 years. So I really liked the environmental aspect of my job beforehand, and it's actually really helped me during this project management stage because there are so many stakeholders that are involved in this project, and I know them all. I've worked with them for years and I've got a really good relationship with them, which really helps when you're trying to move 32 kilometres of tunnel through clay. So it's great. It's the equivalent of HS2 within my industry and my sector. So as a 26-year-old project managing, which is effectively a £1 billion project, it's a pretty exciting job to be in at the moment.
Brilliant. And so we're going to talk about different types of infrastructure the UK is developing, and as you said, you're working on currently the underground cable in London. Just to start off, just so we're kind of clear with everybody, what do we mean by, when we talk about infrastructure, what exactly do we mean, and can you give us examples of that?
Yeah, so I always see infrastructure as the kind of the basic facilities that we need as a society, not that don't come from nature and the environment. So they can be anything. Roads, so the M25 is a key infrastructure to get people in and out of London on a daily. This project that I'm working on is key to power, to keep the lights on in London. It's vital infrastructure that you need at home, you need in your home life, but you also need in your work life. So it's really what nature can't provide for us, but we need as a society.
Brilliant. And we're going to talk through some of the infrastructure projects that you've done and that you're working on. You mentioned that you're particularly interested in that environmental kind of aspect of it when we're talking about it, and that kind of planning part. You're in charge of these massive, as you said, like £1 billion projects, which is amazing. A lot of your work is based on environmental impact assessments, or EIAs, which is studied a lot or touched upon, particularly in A-level geography. Why is it important to assess the environment when you are making these big infrastructure projects in the UK?
Yeah, I think as a society, we've become a lot more tuned into sustainable impacts and our impacts on future generations. And environmental impact assessment is actually embedded in UK law. So sizes of developments or specific industries, you have to do an assessment of what your environmental impact will be, not only during the construction of a scheme, but also during the operation as well. So my scheme at the moment is going to be operating for 120 years. So I need to know when I'm building it, what is my impact going to be on local residents, noise, air quality, but also for the future generations that will still be using this infrastructure that we're providing. So I kind of want to do a bit of a worked example of environmental impact assessment. There are lots of stages and these take years to complete sometimes. So as I said, the one that I was 2 years of my life working full time and weekends trying to do it. But there's lots of stages and they follow the development stage of a design. So you have an idea, you want to build a shopping centre in Lewisham, for example. It's like, oh, that would be a great idea. I want the new Westfield right next door. So you have that idea and you start optioneering phases of what it's going to look like or how, where you want to put it and things like that. You need to start considering your environmental assessment. It's a real cradle to grave approach that is throughout large infrastructure projects. So once you take your shopping centre, you've come up with your site layout, but how many floors will it be? Are we close to bus facilities? Are we close to the DLR or the tube so that we can get people there sustainably using public transport rather than having to build a car park? Is there enough vacant land? Will we have to do demolition works of something that's old and not of use anymore? So all of this has an environmental impact. So that's the kind of first optioneering stage, and then you start scoping topics in. So it's an assessment of how far do we need to track these impacts through the cradle of this project. So if we take the shopping centre example, noise-wise, if we look at noise, if you live right next to that and it's currently a vacant site, and then I'm going to start building a 10-storey shopping centre or 4-storey shopping centre for the next 3 years, that's a complete background noise level than you're used to. For construction, but also for operation, if we've got thousands of visitors visiting the site each day. So we need to figure out how without disturbing the residents already. So we have to scope in the impacts of noise. Nature is slightly different. So if we take a really urban site like London, the likelihood is there isn't going to be much environment, as in the fluffy animals and the flowers, as people say to me all the time. So that's probably something that we can scope out a bit more. Because it's not necessarily us putting something there isn't going to have any more detrimental impact on the lack of wildlife in this area. So it's not something that we have to look at, but maybe we want to help enhance the wildlife of this area. So we want to put in some nice landscape gardens, and that's how we can help provide a sustainable solution, which is in something which is quite a big carbon footprint. And then go back to the transport. If we have like an increase in traffic, we need to make sure that our public transport can take that increase in traffic. So we've got more people coming into the area to shop. Can we handle that footfall? Can we handle the big machinery that's going to be needed to build this site? There's going to be some big cranes, some big foundations that need to go in. So we need to make sure that all of that's considered. And then when it's developed to specific, the design's developed to a certain standard, we take this and we produce one which will show how much glass that we need to use and what's the embedded carbon of that design. And we want to try and design out as much embedded carbon as possible and come up with more sustainable solutions. So that's where you can come in and you can think about the different materials that we're using, or doing some big landscape gardens and green areas for people to sit down and eat lunch, which they bought on site. It's beneficial for the environment, beneficial for the users of the new site. And then with transport, when it's in use, you was doing detailed design of if we need a car park because people are going to be going to IKEA and they need to take home their new furniture, we obviously need car parking spaces. But how many of them are we going to put into the design versus cycle spaces, which is a really sustainable use of transport? So all of those different aspects come in and we feed quite heavily into the design stages, and then we compile all of this information into a report that's normally hundreds of pages long, and then it gets submitted to the governing body. So be that a local council to approve a planning permission, or in the likes of HS2, because it's got royal assent, that all of this environmental impact assessment had to go to the government, and they read through it all, and then you get called into a hearing and you have to justify why you have decided that it's got this certain impact and how you think that your design has actually helped the sustainability agenda of your, that county, that borough in London or the UK. So it's a full cradle to grave approach.
Brilliant. You've actually said so many kind of interesting things which link to geography there. So kind of the first one is that the environmental impact assessment, that is what you're doing, is you're really assessing what the environmental impacts are going to be. I mean, that's simply what it is. For those who haven't heard about it, an EIA or an environmental impact assessment is just assessing the environment. But you really talked about that sustainability as well. So the kind of idea about what is the noise, how is that going to impact the residents, and then transport as well. And in geography, for A-level and GCSE, we look at that social, economic and environmental impact. So kind of really drawing on it all together. I have a few questions off some of the last ones. If you could just clarify them. Like you talked about embedded carbon. What exactly is kind of embedded carbon when we're talking about kind of the glass and building materials?
Yeah, sure. So concrete as a material has there's a lot of carbon that goes into the concrete and the manufacturing of that. So can we look at different materials that we could use which would have the same structural integrity as this block of concrete, but it has less carbon that's involved in the manufacturing process, or that is actually embedded into that material, so that we don't have to produce it, we don't have to transport it, which adds more carbon, a larger carbon footprint in, and we don't have to then, because everything has a design life, at the end we don't have to demolish it and get rid of that, and then we've got this carbon just sitting there, and what do we do with it? So we try, and it all goes into the kind of circular economy makeup of reduce, reuse, recycle, and keep on recycling until you get to the smallest endpoint possible. So you could use recycled concrete. That would definitely help the embedded carbon level, or you could pick a slightly more sustainable material, timber or something like that, or ceramic or something.
We really talk about that in our day-to-day lives, like people reducing, reusing, and recycling. But actually, hearing that is also part of the aim of FIG, to also make sure that we are reducing our environmental impact. We often don't hear about that as well when it comes into the news. It might just be that they're impacting people's homes, but actually a lot of thought is kind of going into before and how you can be most sustainable. And then the other one was, I suppose this is different for every project, but for one of the projects you worked on, how long does it take to do an environmental impact assessment? You said it's a really, really long report, and you do it at the design stage.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely varies on the size of the project. So if you were doing a planning application for your house, you wanted to knock down your house and build something new, you would have to do some form of environmental assessment on, whether it be ecology or it be noise. And that can be a couple of months worth of work. You collect your data and you do your assessment. But things like HS2, for example, that would have taken 5 to 10 years to compile all of this data and actually do the number crunching, because you're looking at the environment, but as you said earlier, sustainability is, I call it the 3 Ps. It's people, planet, and profit. So you've got to look at that profit section from an environmental perspective of, is what we're doing actually for something such as HS2, is it a good use of taxpayers' money? Are we actually creating a sustainable project by spending all of this money up front? So it's a real fine balance sometimes about how to do it, but yeah, sometimes years.
Yeah, because particularly HS2, this just seems to be like an ongoing project, like in the news, and it's delayed and everything. But yeah, when we're talking about the future of infrastructure, a lot of your role is how we can develop the country to support the population, as you said, with economic growth. And you called it the 3 Ps, or which I really like actually. And we normally just say social, economic, and environmental, trying to make of sustainability. Please can you explain the importance, what is the importance of infrastructure for the future of the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so we've got a lot of big infrastructure projects that are happening at the moment. You've got, especially around London, we've got Thames Tideway, we've got Crossrail, we've got HS2, tunnels, but it's not as in the news as everything else. And that's because there was a real building boom in the Victorian era to give us the infrastructure that London has at the moment. But sadly, everything does have a design life, and it's all coming to an end. So we now need to think about how we can redefine the infrastructure that we've been given by previous generations for what our needs are now, what the future needs are likely to be. And then we need to put that sustainability agenda into the future. So kind of people, if we go back to three-piece people, how does our infrastructure help people? Do we reinvent the wheel of what infrastructure we already have? So take Thames Tideway as a sewer. It's a super sewer now. So Victoria's built a great sewer system for London. Are we going to reinvent the wheel? No, we're just going to expand the size of it to ensure that it meets the capacity of the needs of the capital today. But then if you take the project that I'm currently working on, a lot of our network is laid beneath the roads, and it's not sustainable for us to rip up all of the roads in London, because that has an impact across everyone's lives, across everyone's economy, and it's not a sustainable infrastructure solution for our future generations. So that's why we're building a tunnel. So we build it now, and then in 60 years' time, when we have to redo cabling, we just go down the tunnel, pull the cables out, and put the new cables in. So there's lots of different ways that you have to think about infrastructure and think about how it will benefit the future generation. Because you can't just design and build for today. You have to design and build for tomorrow. And a lot of the criteria that you have to follow, so climate change, for example, and flooding, you have to, sometimes, depending on the areas that you are, you have to design for a 1 in 100-year flood plus climate change. And then you use your climate change data that we've already got and then embed that into your design.
Brilliant. And I've actually just shown the pictures of you with the tunnel that you're working on as well, so they can just see kind of what it means when we're building these electricity grids under London as well. Another type of infrastructure is smart motorways, and we can touch upon it for GCSE, but again, it kind of involves many of the stakeholders that we've talked about as well. Could you tell us, what are smart motorways, and why are our motorways changing into smart motorways now?
Yeah, sure. So a smart motorway is just, in basic terms, it's widening the hard shoulder of a motorway to make it a running lane. So when there's because everyone's got their own car now, or a lot of people commute on motorways to and from work, to and from leisure, there's a lot more road traffic than when these motorways were initially designed and built. So instead of using a smart motorway uses the existing footprint, so we don't have to do additional land take on either side. So we're not encroaching into what is towns and cities in some places, but also farmland and nature and wildlife. So it doesn't widen the footprint of the motorway, it just utilises dead space. So we widen the hard shoulder, and then that can become a lane when it's really congested, or if there's an accident, you've still got 3 out of your 4 lanes that can run. And then all of the signalling, so the speed limits, the cameras, and the notification signs have all been upgraded with more recent technology. So it's got the social benefit of it is good, in the fact it's going to spend less time in traffic jams is the thought process behind it. But it's also good from an environmental perspective, in that we're not taking any more additional land. We're actually utilising what we've got at the moment and just tweaking our design to make sure that it's a better use of the space that we have. Motorway hard shoulders are actually teeming with wildlife. There's a lot of deer that live in the hard shoulder of a motorway, so in the verges with all the woodland. So we don't want to encroach on things like that, on that wildlife and that nature and that habitat, when we can just use the existing area we've got.
And I suppose a massive also benefit of this, and I suppose HS2 as well, is that it does also provide a lot of jobs as well in different areas around the UK. But there are lots of kind of protests on it on the news. I was just reading about how a guy is still protesting whilst on COVID-19 lockdown, and he's like attached himself to a tree because he's protesting about the environmental damage. Is it mainly, when you're coming up with these big infrastructures, is it the environmental damage? Is that what the public are most kind of worried about when it comes to building them, do you think?
I think it's that and the economic impact that it might have. HS2, we all know in the news it's delayed, it's over bikes like that. But as you say, it does have a social benefit in that it's an opportunity for thousands of people to have jobs and have jobs. The job creation out of such a massive scheme is really beneficial. There is an environmental impact. There has to be through the route that it's taking, but the route that it's taking is the best route for design, environment, economic. There are so many different ways, different aspects that feed into this design. I'm not an expert. I don't work on it at the moment, but for them to pick a route like that from an environmental view, they'll have to do mitigation to offset the impact that they'll be doing. So if they're going through and they're taking woodland, they will have to do woodland replacement or translocation schemes. They'll have to enhance different areas of the country for biodiversity to counteract what they've taken away.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, because that's one thing which we debate actually at GCSE, kind of about HS2, like what are mainly you can see like the social, as you said, and maybe the economic benefits, apart from obviously the cost, but the environmental, it's quite difficult to sometimes say what the benefits are, but actually knowing that they do some more kind of biodiversity enhancement in other areas, that's really good as well, because we're constantly, as geographers, always trying to understand what the different opinions are, look at that social, economic and environmental, which is what we've been doing so well at kind of discussing today. Just a quick note, if anybody has any questions, if you can write them in the comments, it can be on careers, it can be on universities, anything like that, just write them in the comments. I've kind of got one big main question for Georgie, and then we're going to go on to just asking why she picked geography, which is an interesting one when we get down to it. You've talked about what your main project is today. So you are building electricity cables under London. Why are we? What's the need for this? Basically, just to explain, like I didn't really know much of it was going on as well. How will it support our population growth in the future as well as one of the major cities, the UK? If you could just kind of give us a bit of detail about what does the electricity cables mean for London and for the UK?
Okay, so the current electricity cables that we're using that power your kettle and the lights in your school is coming to the end of its design life. It was built in the 60s, and we've got better ways of maintaining these cables. So we used to use oil to cool them because they get really hot, and it's not a very sustainable solution. So with the advancements in technology, we can actually provide a far more sustainable solution by placing the cables in a tunnel and ensure that there's good ventilation to keep the temperature down. And putting it in a tunnel rather than directly burying them is a much better solution. So instead of replacing the existing cables, we're actually building new cable routes, because earlier all of our cable, or the majority of our cables, are laid under the main roads in London. So instead of ripping up the old Kent Road, which would be a nightmare for half of South London commuting on a daily basis and trying to relay cables, kilometres and kilometres of cables, we're sinking a tunnel 20 metres below the surface, and then we're reinstalling all of the cables into that tunnel. So it's a cleaner energy solution because of the better way that we can ventilate the tunnels and the technology advancements that we've got. And it's also a sustainable solution because we need to every 50, 60, 70 years. But the design life of this tunnel is 120 years, and it can be extended with maintenance. So for 120 years, we will just be able to replace our infrastructure without anyone knowing. But you won't see Thamesway public news, it being on the news about how we need all of this. You won't have that because you won't know that these cables are being replaced, because we can just drop our operatives down. There's a little monorail system, so they go along on a little bike and they can lay these cables in and out to maintain the power supply for all of South London. So this is from Wimbledon all the way down to Crayford, so all of South London, and we've already done that over the past 10 years. And the capital is growing. It always is. So by putting in these new cables, this better technology, we're giving, it's like a secure light system. We're going to keep the lights on for the next 120 years.
Brilliant. And so previously it was the oil cables, you said, and now we've got tunnel with new cables. Would that be able to enhance our use of renewable energy as well in London?
That's a good point. The tunnel itself, it won't, no, because it's a supply rather than a production of energy. But as an industry, I think we've gone 42 days in a row without using any coal to power any of the UK. If we can continue that trend, it's only a positive thing. You know, this is 2020. We can do anything in this area. We have, you know, the technology to succeed. And if we've already done 40 days, then I don't see why we can't do another 40. And then by the time that these cables will be in operation, all of that flow could very possibly have come from renewable energy.
Brilliant. So we've got two really good questions as well, and just a few shout outs, and we'll then ask about kind of careers as well. So hi to Wealth, Emily, Rachel, Zerda, and Wendy, and someone else I can't read your name, sorry, but hello, welcome everybody, and some really good questions. Wealth, really, really good one. We're going to answer that in a second. But one question before we kind of get lefty and how you got your career. I've got a question saying, because infrastructure is planned so far in advance, as you talked about, it takes years to do environmental impact assessments and then obviously going to the government as well. Does this mean that by the time they're completed, the technology can be out of date? And how can you adjust to kind of...
Yeah, it's a really good question. It can be, I think, is a very simple answer. But throughout that process, so you go and get a scent for your infrastructure and you can start building it. But there's this continuous design tweaking and refinement that goes on throughout the build. So we're at the beginning of a 6-year construction build, and we've already tweaked the design in a number of ways. And there's always opportunity to you have like a risk and an opportunities register. And if you think there's a really great solution, that's something relatively new that you can bring into this design, you table it, and then the design go away and they see how we can fit that in. So we've just come up with, so we have to build some new roads to get into areas so that we can do some construction work. So we've done the design for them and it's all been approved, but now we've been given a solution which is far more environmentally friendly. Instead of laying tarmac down to make these roads, it's a grass solution that is a kind of a natural tarmac, and so that's really new product that's on the market, and that's what we've now put that into our design. We've said, no, we're not going to use the tarmac anymore. We're going to use this because this is a far better solution. So you can chop and change, and you can make sure that it is as up to date as possible. But there is always advancements that you hope, and then through your operation and your maintenance, you can bring in these technologies.
Brilliant. And it's like kind of always like just checking that, like kind of, as you said, that risk assessment as well, seeing if it is outdated, what you can do. Question: you did BSc at geography at university. How did you know? Did you always want to study geography? What was your kind of, for our A-level listeners? How did you get to kind of where you are today? And then I've got a question from Wealth afterwards, which we both might have to answer together.
Sure. So no, I didn't always want to do geography at uni. I actually wanted to be a doctor, but I was really, really bad at it. That didn't happen. But I really loved geography, and I loved the problem solving of it, and I loved there's a lot of bouncing ideas around off each other, and then you come to a conclusion, and that is suddenly the world makes a bit more sense, and you understand. So I liked it, I enjoyed it, and I was good at it. And then when I went to uni, this whole other world of geography kind of opened up, of something that isn't necessarily on the A-level or the GCSE curriculum. I was far more based around real life situations and scenarios. And so because I did the BSc, there were a lot of physical geography modules that I needed to take, but then you can also you get to pick and choose what modules you want to do at uni. So I took some really interesting ones in the politics of geography. So we did like a lot of discussions and debating about fracking and whether that was a sustainable solution. And then I also did some like history modules as well, like the history of geography. So we took and then we did a kind of geographical reconstruction of how they solved the crimes. So there's loads of little different aspects of it. It was just it was really interesting for 3 years because it was always different. And then some of the modules I took were based around Boris Johnson wanting to build a new airport in London. And that's where I really kind of started to understand what environmental impact assessment was, because I had to do a mini impact assessment. So this is really interesting. So I Googled lots of consultancies and I just asked for work experience. And then one of them said, there's a graduate opportunity. So that's how I ended up doing this job.
That's brilliant. And I think we're always saying that sometimes you might not know exactly what you want to do, and I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was older, and you just kind of got to do something that you enjoy, and then ultimately you will kind of fall into a career that you enjoy. A question which I think maybe like both of us might answer, but Georgie, if you could start us off. Wells was asked, what is the difference between a BA and a BSc degree when we're talking about kind of geography?
Yeah, sure. So BSc is physical geography. So you do a lot more modules around rivers, tectonics, those aspects of physical geography, and it's more mathematical and scientific. And then the BA is a human geography degree, so is more around the social aspects of geography, or at least it was at my university. That was the main difference.
Brilliant. And at your university, did you have the option of either doing a BSc or a BA when you applied?
Yes, but I did the BSc because I liked that there was always an answer for physical geography. So I found that really interesting. But then I took a lot of the BA modules. So you commonly do the same modules for the first year of uni, and then you split off into your tutorial groups. But there's nothing from picking modules, or there wasn't at my uni, of picking modules from the different courses. It just meant that my dissertation was much more physical aspects of geography than it was the human aspect.
Yeah, brilliant. And just to add on to that it just completely depends on the university. So some universities I know are very much like you either do a BA or you do a BSc, but actually Bristol, all geography is a BSc. So though I'm very much a human geographer, so I did like my dissertation on graffiti and art, and based in Bristol actually, where you are at the moment. But I also did a lot of economics modules as well, and lots of people did economics as like a separate part and added into geography as well. But because we did a lot of data and had to have these few modules, it actually counted as a BSc degree, although I would say it feels more like a BA that I did. So for that kind of question, for that answer also is just to see what your university is offering, because there will be so many different versions. Some universities will have more specialists in, say, tectonics. So I think like Durham has a really big tectonics specialist, and then Bristol will have different kind of researchers and professors who are interested in different aspects of it. So really have a look, and that's how, as Georgie is saying, there's so many different options, and it really does broaden when you get to university. Hope most people find things that they hadn't even thought of really that could link to geography. As you said, like Jack the Ripper, and I did art and graffiti. They're things that we didn't really study at school, which is really exciting about geography as a degree. Well, I think that comes to the end of our chat interview, and we have learned so much. Thank you, Georgie. I think the focus ability has been absolutely fantastic, like really going over that social, economic, environmental, how you think about that in the planning stages, and then how you work with so many different stakeholders, and really great to kind of understand how you have gone from a geography A level to degree to then working in something which really assesses the environment. So can I thank you, and thank you from everybody listening too. I know it's super useful. So thank you for letting us interview you.
Quite all right. Thanks for having me.
That's brilliant. And then just for everybody else, it's half term next week, so we're not actually going to be online, so everybody can enjoy what should be the beautiful weather. But the week after, so the 4th of June on Thursday again, we are going into 2 ways. One is we're being joined by Dr. Kimberly Thomas, who is from Philadelphia Temple University. So we're crossing borders over our call, and she will be talking to us about international water conflicts, which links to so many areas in the A-level specification, water and carbon cycles. We're going to be talking about conflict in Southeast Asia with transboundary water sources. So that will be super, super interesting. I'm really looking forward to it. So that will be online shortly, and then you can press reminder so that you get an email sent to you. But for me, I hope everybody enjoys the sun. Thank you very much for coming in on this sunny day, and have a good break